Hi friends, my name is Angela and welcome back to my channel. I know for a lot of you are coming off your summer holidays, and in fact over 50% of the people that watch my channel are from the United States. So I know that you're coming off the end of summer, you're coming into the rush of going back to school, back to work, and you probably spend a lot of time over the summer reading some big books, no doubt. For those of us in the Southern Hemisphere, we are just coming into spring, and I feel that these two seasons pivoting for us both, whether you're in the Northern or the Southern Hemisphere, is a great time for a fresh look at books, and that's where today's video comes in. I feel like a change of season is a great time to jump into smaller books, and that's what I have recommendations for you today for, is some very short mini masterpieces that deliver big impact in small packages. Short stories can often be dismissed as being light or insubstantial, but I'm here to tell you that these recommendations I have for you are not at all like that. But when done right, short stories can really pierce your heart in a way that a long novel or the longest novel may never. One of my favourite anecdotes about Ernest Hemingway illustrates this point really well. Apparently, he made a bet with someone that he could write the shortest story in the world and that it would still have impact. An entire story in just 6 words. And I think this has now become myth, and I think there are plenty of ways that it has been disproved that he didn't do this, but we'll go along with this anecdote for the time being. So as the story goes, Hemingway, being Hemingway, knocked it out of the park, and the story he wrote was baby shoes, for sale, never worn. Just 6 words, and there is so much heartbreak and unrealized dreams tied up in that tiny little phrase. And that's the magic of the short form. It has a tendency to surprise you with depth and meaning and emotion. So today I want to share with you 5 books that are each under 100 pages long. You can read this in an hour to 2 hours in an afternoon, but each of them pack an incredible punch. This would be great if you are following a Shorty September reading plan for September, and I will share with you a couple of books that I hope to get to in September as well that fit in this category of short stories. I hope they intrigue you, surprise you, and perhaps stay with you as long as that little phrase of Ernest Hemingway's 6-word story has stayed with me over the years. So let's keep going with Hemingway, who is a master of short form fiction, and the book I would recommend is The Old Man and the Sea, which comes in at a very neat 99 pages. It was published in 1952, just 10 years before Hemingway died, and it won a Nobel Prize. Now, if you told me that I would like a book about an old man who goes fishing and the entire book is just about that, I would tell you you're crazy. That is not a book that I want to read. But this is such an incredible, heroic journey that I loved from start to finish. So the book opens in Havana, and our main character, Santiago, who is the old man, is down on his luck. So much so that the young boy that goes fishing with Santiago regularly has been told by his parents to go find someone else to fish with because Santiago is a lost cause and he hasn't caught a fish for over 84 days. The relationship between the old man and the young boy is really endearing and tender. And when that 85th day comes along, the old man gets up and goes fishing by himself. I think this is one of those books that on face value it is one thing, but as you come to it, every reader will get something else out of the story as well, because there's a lot of themes running through this book. For me, the description of the environment as the old man is fishing is really wonderful. The water, the flora and fauna like dolphins, sharks and flying fish was really enchanting. And it is described as a slow-paced read, but once Santiago finally hooks a fish, it is one of the most captivating and thrilling ride I think I've read in a long time. It has themes about aging, relationships, courage and beauty, and I think it's one of those books, like a lot of these ones I'm recommending, that each time you read it, you will get a different type of theme coming out and jumping out at you. Next is one of my most favorite short stories that it comes in just at 50 pages, and that is Galatea by Madeline Miller. Galatea is a short story retelling of the myth of Galatea and Pygmalion from the perspective of Galatea. In the afterword, Miller says that this is a response to the Pygmalion myth in the Metamorphoses by Ovid. It's a myth that really isn't told very often. There are Greek myths that you hear over and over and over again. They are very familiar. Galatea is one that is very slight. As the myth goes, Galatea is a statue that was created by Pygmalion, and then the goddess Aphrodite turns the statue into a real woman who then became the wife of the sculptor. But he is very obsessive and he has now locked her away from the world. It feels really hard and icy, and you do get that coldness, I think, that you get from the idea that she is a statue made of marble. But it's a fantastic feminist retelling of a myth that hasn't gotten a lot of airtime. I really love it. I love Miller's writing, but to be fair, I would give Madeline Miller's Grocery List 5 stars. I love her writing so much. But if you haven't come across this yet and you are waiting for a new mythology retelling, this is a great one. Another story of a woman, this time a key figure in history as opposed to mythology, is The Testament of Mary by Colm Toibin. The Testament of Mary talks about the cataclysmic event in Mary's life which led to her overpowering grief for her son. This book is set in the period of time after the crucifixion, when Mary and the disciples are now exiled, and she is piecing together her memories of all the events that led to this violent death of her son. And she remembers him in a very different way, as a very different person to how the disciples want him to be remembered. It is a book that is both tender and also rage-filled. And I do recommend that you don't read this book expecting it to line up especially well with the plot or with the timeline of the Gospels. There's a lot of creative license taken, but I think that's because this isn't a retelling of a Gospel. This is the story of a woman who has lost her son in the most tragic circumstances you could possibly imagine. The Mary in this book is not the serene Virgin Mary that we would expect to see, but she is filled with grief and guilt, and this is her working through that process in her mind. With this book, I've cheated a little bit. It is 103 pages long, but if you haven't read it yet, it's a book that I haven't heard people talk about of Colm Toibin's much, and I would recommend it for a short book this September. Because if you know Colm Toibin's writing, you know that he writes women's stories very well. He has a way of getting into women's minds in such an interesting way. The writing is beautiful. The subject matter is incredible. Highly recommend it. Now, if minimalism was an author, it would be Claire Keegan, in my opinion. She is a brilliant writer, and she has a couple of short books. She has a number of short story collections. She is a brilliant writer with such a directness and an honesty, but sometimes it's not what she writes, it's what she fails to write, what she leaves space for in her stories that really stays with you. I heard someone say once that her writing at first glance to a casual reader, it looks very minimal, but once you become familiar with her writing, the scope is so rich and full, and it reveals itself with each reread. So when you think of Claire Keegan, you might think of her book Small Things Like These that a lot of people might recommend, and that is an incredible story. It really is amazing. But the one that I want to recommend to you is Foster, and this comes in, I think, around 92 pages. It was first published in 2010. It is simplistic, the writing is sparse, and it is layered with such an emotional depth. The story is about a young girl in Ireland who one summer she is sent to live with some distant relatives because her mother is pregnant and expecting yet another child in their already very full house. And in this short summer of this girl staying with this family, she is experiencing affection and love in a way that she never has in her life so far, and it really transforms her and she blossoms. But there's always this shadow looming over the story that this is just one summer, it's not forever, and she will have to leave it and go back to her home at some point and her family. I believe this is now part of the school syllabus in Ireland, and I wish I was able to read this when I was at school. It is phenomenal, and I think if there was one book on this list I would call perfect, this would be it. It's as though Keegan, I don't know if she labours over every sentence and punctuation and then edits it down to its very bare bones, that this story, even though it's 92 pages long, it will give you something that even a 300 or 400 page book may not. There is also a film adaptation of this book called The Quiet Girl. So and I think it would probably be a really great late summer read. So if you do read this, go and find the movie to watch afterwards, and you will think about it for such a long time after you finish it. My next recommendation is a book that is only 32 pages long, and that is The Man Who Planted Trees by Giono. And this is an allegorical tale that I think requires rereading over and over again, at least in the hope that it will remind us continually of how our actions, no matter how small, have a lasting effect for generations. This was originally published in 1980 and in French, so this is a translated edition, and it is simply written but nonetheless powerful. The story is set in the foothills of the French Alps, and our narrator meets a shepherd who has quietly taken on the task of planting 100 acorns a day to reforest this area that he lives in. 10 years later, the narrator returns to this location and sees how this shepherd's one small, gentle decision has transformed the region and brought with that transformation life and hope. It's almost fairy tale-like in its format, and I think it is something that everyone should read at least once. Don't dismiss it because it is such a small story, and the story is perhaps something you may go, oh, I get what it's going to be about, I'm not going to read it. I would still recommend that you do read this anyway. And every time I read this book, it makes me think of one of my favourite Bible passages, which is about how we are taught or told to live a life that is quiet and to mind our own business and to work with our hands. Every time I read this book, I think of that passage, and it reinvigorates me to want to live in that way. Not planting 100 acorns a day, but in my own way, living in that way. And especially when it comes to conservation and the world and the decisions we make and the things that we do, and they may seem small to us on a daily basis, but they have long-term repercussions. This is the Vintage Earth edition from Penguin, and it actually has some beautiful wood carving drawings, I think they're called. They're really lovely, and it gives it a little bit of that fairy tale feeling that I mentioned. So this is a great edition if you're looking for one. So those are my recommendations of books that I have read and recommend to you, and I'm going to share with you 2 books that I am hoping to get to this September. The first book is Red Dog by Louis de Bernieres, and this is quintessentially Australian, if not Western Australian. And Louis de Bernieres wrote Captain Corelli's Mandolin, so he has quite a gravitas behind him. I'm going to read this briefly to you. This is the foreword he has. The real Red Dog was born in 1971 and died on November 20th, 1979. The stories I have here are all based on what really happened to him, but I have invented all the characters partly because I know very little about the real people in Red Dog's life, and partly because I would not want to offend any of them by misrepresenting them. Red Dog is an interesting thing to try and explain. Red Dog was a real dog who lived in the northwest of Western Australia in the 70s, and he kind of became everyone's dog, and he had some incredible adventures. And now in Dampier, there is a bronze statue that is there to the memory of Red Dog. It's quite an incredible story. And it was before my time when he was around, but I know of the legend. I lived near the town or the locations where he would visit and go. And this is desert area. This is quite an incredible location. So anyway, if you're interested, do a quick Google of Red Dog and you will find some information. This, I think, is going to be really nostalgic for me because I grew up in this area, and it's something I wasn't looking for this book, and I found it by accident in a secondhand store and nearly squealed and grabbed it, and yes, I'm going to read that one. So this is one book that I'm going to read, which I think is going to be a fantastic read. It actually comes in at 115 pages, and if you are a non-Australian and you want to read this, there is a lot of Australian isms in here, Australian slang. But de Bernieres has put a glossary at the back so you can catch up and understand what is being talked about. The other one that I want to read is Laurie Lee, A Many-Coated Man. This is not a book by Laurie Lee, but this is a book that was compiled out of the contributions made to a memorial service for Laurie Lee in 1997. There was a service that was organised by Jock Gallagher, who was a BBC broadcaster and also a long-time friend of Laurie Lee, and also Laurie Lee's wife and daughter. A lot of people were invited to share their memories about Laurie Lee, to share writings about him. People that knew him were at this memorial service, and this is a compilation of that service, of the things that they said and the anecdotes about his life, and some of it is some poetry of Laurie Lee's himself because they could not improve upon it. This is just one section of the synopsis. This small book, which takes its title from one of Laurie's best-known poems, prints the complete text of the celebratory service. It is published in tribute to a remarkable writer, and in the belief too that it offers a small but fascinating portrait of a gifted yet complex and elusive character. There is some imagery in here, some photographs, and it comes in at 69 pages. So I hope you enjoyed this little recommendation video. I am hoping it is as short and sweet as these books are, and I would love to know if you're going to read any, or maybe you have read them and you agree with me or disagree with me, as sometimes people do. These are some beautiful books that I'm looking forward to catching up with again, and I hope that you also do as well. But I hope you find a recommendation in here, and I would love to hear your thoughts below. Is there something under 100 pages you would recommend? I would love to hear. Thank you so much for watching. My next video, I think, will be my wrap up of my August reading, which has been complicated and varied, and it's taking me a long time to compile my thoughts about it. So that'll be my next video, but thank you so much for joining me, and I will speak with you soon. Bye.